Hare Krishna. Welcome to our online reading retreat labs. So we are reading Śrīla Prabhupāda-līlāmṛta. Till now we have completed till the chapter number 5. So today we are going to start with the chapter number 6. So let's then get started. So I'll be reading from the Veda base. So let me share my screen. So you're reading the chapter number 6, that is an unknown friend. So we will discover who is the unknown friend here. So let's then get started. Let the sharp moralist accuse me of being illusion. I do not mind. Experts in Vedic activities may slander me as being misled. Friends and relatives may call me frustrated. My brothers may call me a fool. The wealthy Mammonites may point me out as a mad. And the learned philosophers may assert that I am much too proud. Still, my mind doesn't budge an inch from the determination to serve the lotus feet of Govinda, though I am unable to do it. Madhavendra Puri. Aside from his difficulties with business and family, Abhay had to survive the cataclysms of Indian independence and partition. He was not active politically but was one of hundreds of millions affected by the violent dawn of Indian independence. While Gandhi and the Hindu dominated Congress were demanding united free India, the Muslim League led by M.A. Jinnah called for partition and their own Muslim nation, Pakistan. The conflict raged. In August 1946, the outgoing British government invited Jawaharlal Nehru, Congress Party president, to form an interim national government, but the League objected. The Muslim cause would be denied. Jinnah had already declared August 16 Direct Action Day, which amounted to little in most parts of India, but in Calcutta erupted in Hindu Muslim rioting. In 5 days of violence, for 4,000 died and thousands more were wounded. In the months that followed, Hindu Muslim rioting repeatedly flared off throughout India. Early in 1947, when the new Viceroy Lord Mountbatten met with Indian political leaders to plan transfer of power, riots again broke out as Muslims demanded Pakistan. At the threat of civil war, Congress finally agreed on partition, and on July 18, the Indian Independence Bill passed without dissent. 1 month later, India and Pakistan emerged as independent nations with Jawaharlal Nehru as India's first prime minister. Partition tore India, leaving 5 million Sikhs and Hindus in Pakistan and as many as Muslims in India, and the Great Migration began. Refugees fleeing from Pakistan to India and from India to Pakistan clashed with each other and even with their own countrymen of the opposing faith, and the violence that erupted claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. Srila Prabhupada. Our independence movement was started by Mahatma Gandhi for uniting all the different sections of the people, but actually the result was what that instead of being united, India was partitioned. And the partition became so poisonous that formerly there was only sporadic Hindu Muslim riots in some places, but now there was organized fighting between Pakistan and Hindustan. So actually, we were not being united, we were being separated. The Hindus would go to the Moscow of Muslim and break it, and the Muslim would go to the temples of the Hindus and break the idol. And they will think we have finished the Hindus' gods. Just like the Hindus also think, oh, we have broken their God. They are all ignorant. God cannot be Hindu, God cannot be Muslim, God cannot be Christian, God is God. So this is a very interesting sentence. This is a striking point here. So we'll note it down in our notes. Next to the next paragraph, we have seen in 1947 Hindu-Muslim fighting. One party was Hindu, the other party was Muslim. They fought, and so many died. And after death, there was no distinction who was Hindu or who was Muslim. The municipal men gathered them together in piles to throw them somewhere. They fought, and in Bagh Bazar, there were heaps of dead bodies. And when it is a dead body, nobody could understand who was Hindu and who was Muslim. Simply, it was to be clear from the road. Avai was not expecting Indian independence to bring any real solutions unless the leaders were God conscious. That change, what change would there be? Now he saw that instead of suffering at the hand of a foreign rule, the people were free to suffer under their own countrymen. In fact, the fighting and suffering had increased. Throughout the years of Indian political struggles, Abhay had never lost his desire to propagate Krishna consciousness. He had seen how promises of unity and independence had brought mostly higher prices and civic mismanagement. He had seen neighborhoods where Indians had lived peacefully for generations erupt in hatred and rioting. In the wake of British and Indian diplomatic manipulations, it was as Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati had described it. Persons who were strongly enthralled by the consciousness of enjoying material life and who have therefore accepted as their leader or a guru. A similar blind man attached to external sense objects cannot understand that the goal of life is to return home back to Godhead and engage in the service of Lord Vishnu. As blind men guided by another blind man miss the right path and fall into a ditch, materially attached men led by another materially attached men are bound by the ropes of fruitive labor, which are made of very strong cords, and they continue again and again in materialistic life, suffering the threefold miseries. So we see there is an analogy here. We'll also capture this as an analogy in our note. So we'll have two sections. One is for quote and one for our analogy section. The Vaishnava prays to his spiritual master who has opened my eyes with the touchlight of transcendental knowledge, and he feels obliged to help humanity by bearing the same torch. As a representative of the eternal Vaishnava Parampara, Abhay wanted to set the light of transcendental knowledge onto the field of current crisis. That had been the purpose of Back to Godhead, although since 1944 he had been unable to print the magazine. But even without the means to publish, Abhay continued writing. His most ambitious project was Gitopanishad, his translation and commentary of Bhagavad Gita. Gandhi and others often spoke of the wisdom of Bhagavad Gita. Indians never forget their Gita, but most proponents didn't reach it as Krishna had taught it. They would not recognize the Lord Krishna, the speaker of the Gita, as the supreme personality of Godhead, but would extract his words as slogans to bolster their own philosophies. Whether the political leaders, religious leaders, or scholars, they almost invariably made their own symbolic and allegorical interpretations. Abhay wanted to present Bhagavad Gita as it is. It was to be 1200 pages, three illustrated, beautiful bound volumes. For Abhay, the books were already in reality, from which he was separated only by time. Over the past 2 years, he had accumulated hundreds of manuscript pages. He wrote in notebooks and on loose papers and then typed the numbered manuscript pages. He would never give the book his full time, but gradually it began to take shape. So here Prabhupada is talking about his ambitious project Gitopanishad. So we'll just make a note of it in this paragraph, which is nothing but your Bhagavad Gita. So we are having three sections. One is notes, second one is analogy, and third one is we are having the quotes, which can be it can be treated as quotes for our from this particular book, particular chapter. Yeah. So we'll go to the next paragraph. He also preached Lord Chaitanya's message through letters, writing to many leaders in the government, to respectable acquaintances, and to people whose articles he had read or those activities had caught his eye in the newspaper. Presenting himself as a humble servant, he wrote to them of his ideas on how India's original Krishna conscious culture could be applied as a successful solution to all manners of dilemmas. Sometimes his letters drew replies, and Abhay would respond, fanning the sparks of interest wherever he found them. A well-known reformer, Mahendra Pratap Raja, was forming what he called the World Federation. Abhay had read a news sheet which Mr. Pratap had published from Vrindavan, in which he had addressed all nations and peoples of the world and called for a unity of mankind. Abhay wrote him suggesting that Lord Krishna's teaching in Bhagavad Gita provided a theistic science capable of uniting all religions. Mr. Pratap replied in May 1947, I admire your deep study of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. I myself am a great admirer of the great classic. I assure you that I am working strictly according to the book Mr. Pratap mentioned in his book Religion of Love, and suggested that I read it if you wanted to know the World Federation's view of religion. Meanwhile, Mr. Pratap wrote, I do not agree to a suggestion of making the name of Krishna or Govinda as the basis of the unity of religions. This would amount to conversion and won't lead to unity of religions. I highly appreciate your efforts in the direction of back to Godhead. How I got the book, read it, and in July 1947, while he was visiting Kanpur, wrote a reply. He had traveled to Kanpur not as a spiritual teacher but as a pharmaceutical salesman. Yet, a typewriter had been available, and out had come his preaching. In continuance of my last postcard, I beg to inform you that I have finished the reading of your book, Religion of Love. In my opinion, the whole thesis is based on philosophy of pantheism and the approach is made by the services of mankind. Religion of love is a true religious idea, but if the approach is made through the service of mankind only, then the process is made imperfect, partial, and unscientific. The true religion of love is perfectly inculcated in Bhagavad Gita. Besides, you have not quoted any authority for all your statements, so it is more or less a dogmatic. In different men put different dogmatic views about religion and its essentials, who is to be accepted and who is not to be. Therefore, the approach shall be and must be authoritative, scientific, and universal. Other than giving the summary of Bhagavad Gita in 10 points, concluding the highest service that can be rendered mankind is therefore to preach the philosophy and religion of Bhagavad Gita for all time, all places, and all people. But extended philosophical dialogue was not usually the result of his letters. In 1947, Abai wrote to high government officers of the newly formed government of India, suggesting a remedy for riots, then turned him away. When he asked to talk to with the governor of West Bengal, the governor secretary replied, His Excellency regrets that he is unable to grant you an interview at present, owing to heavy pressure of work. When he wrote to the assistant secretary to the Ministry of Education, an assistant to the assistant secretary replied, The government of India regret that they are unable to accede to your request. So here we see how Prabhupada has been denied from the government, the then government after the post independence. So that will just make a note of it. Denial from various government department post independence. Independent also, and also we see there was a person's name, Maharendra Pratap Raja. Mahendra Pratap Raja, who has written The Love of God. Just a minute. So we see Mahendra Pratap Raja, who was a well-known reformer at that point of time. And it was called World Federation. So Mahendra Pratap Raja has written a book and he has asked Prabhupada to read that book. The book name is called Religion of Love. But Prabhupada has mentioned it is here. It is based on the philosophy of pantheism. So with this note, we will move further. Hmm. So we'll go to form from here. Sometimes official interest took the form of a patronizing pat on the head. I am sure your scheme for establishing peace will meet with response from our Prime Minister. And another, he, the Minister of Education, is glad to see you are taking to rout our communalism. He suggests that you get in touch with. A local official asked not to be seen. I thank you for all that you've written and the fine sentiments which you have expressed. It is no use arguing the matter, as I do not think that I can serve any useful purpose by joining the organization which you wish to set up. And therefore, you need not take the trouble of seeing me. I wish you, however, all success. In October, after the Calcutta riots of 1947, Abhay wrote to the chairman of the Rehabilitation Committee who replied, regarding Hari Kirtan and Prasadam, you may take any program of your own, but I'm afraid I'm not interested in the same, nor my committee, and therefore there's no necessity of your meeting with me. Abhay was fulfilling his role as a Vaishnava preacher, and the secretaries of the various government offices were recognizing and addressing him as such, but they couldn't appreciate his applications of philosophy of Bhagavad Gita and his suggestions for Hari Kirtana. Occasionally, however, someone seemed interested. Mr. N.T. Asthana, High Court advocate, replied, I am very much obliged to you for your letter. Your broad scheme about spiritual improvement. I thoroughly appreciate the fine feelings which have prompted you to write this letter and the kindness with which you have considered my query. I have been a student of Bhagavad Gita and have also imbibed some of his teachings, but I still lack a good deal and will be glad to be guided by a person of your accomplishment. You may kindly, therefore, send your scheme to me, on receipt of which I will be able to express my views. It was inevitable. So we have seen one of another character in this flow we have, who is the who is finally at least favorable for Prabhupada's mission. So we will mention that in our notes as well. The person's name is Mr. N.P. Asthana, the then High Court advocate, and who was little bit at least supporting Prabhupada's mission. So we proceed further. It was inevitable that Abe could think of engaging Mahatma Gandhi in devotional service because of his lifetime of the of courageous ascetic and moral activities on behalf of his countrymen. Mahatma Gandhi had great power to influence the Indian masses, as with Mahendra Pratap of the World Federation. Mahatma Gandhi's idea of serving God was to try to bring happiness to man through politics and through his own invented methods. As one Englishman had said of Mahatma Gandhi, he is either a saint amongst the politicians or a politician among the saints. But be that as it may, he was not yet fully engaged in pure devotional service, and his activities were not those of a Mahatma as described in Bhagavad Gita. The Gita defines as Mahatma as one who fully engages in worshipping Lord Krishna as the supreme personality of Godhead. Always chanting his glories, the Mahatma encourages others to surrender to Krishna. So here we see the contradiction here, how Gita defines as Mahatma and Prabhupada explains here whether he is a real Mahatma. So here also we have seen how the Englishman said Mahatma Gandhi, saint amongst politician or politician among the saint, whatever may be. So here again we proceed further, but because as a young man Abhay had been a follower of Gandhi's, Abhay had a special feeling for him. Of course, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati had later convinced him to engage exclusively in devotional service. But now Abhay felt his old friendship for Gandhi, even though Gandhi was the towering figure of a worldwide fame and Abhay unknown both to Gandhi and to the world. On December 7, 1947, Abhay wrote to Gandhi from Kanpur. Gandhi was living at the Birla mansion in Delhi, where large military forces throughout the city discouraged Hindu-Muslim rioting. Gandhi's secretary, Pyarilal Nair, described Gandhi at this time the saddest man one could picture. The man he had led in the struggle for Indian independence, Jawaharlal Nehru, Vallabhbhai Patel, and others, he had taken the leaders of the nation, and Gandhi, with his doctrines of nonviolence, unity, and agrarianism, was now at odds with them in many ways. He feared he was becoming an anachronism. His former colleagues admired him but rejected his leadership. All his programs, Hindu Muslim unity, nonviolence, upliftment for the poor, although praised throughout the world, were failures in the India of 1947. On a recent visit to a Muslim refugee camp, a crowd of Muslims who surrounded his car had cursed him, and at a public prayer meeting, a Hindu crowd had shouted him down and ended his meeting when he had attempted to read from the Quran. At 78 years, Gandhi was physically weak and melancholy. In all likelihood, Abhay's letter would never reach him. Abhay knew it. Sending a letter to Gandhi would be like putting a note in a bottle and sending to sea. It would arrive in a flood of mail, and Gandhi would be too busy to see it. But Abhay sent it nonetheless. This is how the letter looks like. Dear friend Mahatma Ji, please accept my respectful namaskar. I am your unknown friend, but I had to write you at the times and again, although you never cared to reply them. I sent you my papers back to Godhead, but your secretaries told me that you have very little time to read the letters and much less for reading the magazines. I asked for an interview with you, but your busy secretaries never cared to reply this. Anyway, as I am your very old friend, although unknown to you, I am writing to you in order to bring you to the rightful position deserved by you. As a sincere friend, I must not deviate from my duty towards a friend like your good self. I tell you, as a sincere friend, that you must immediately retire from active politics if you do not desire to die an inglorious death. You have 125 years to live as you have desire to live, but if you die an inglorious death, it is no worth. The honor and prestige that you have obtained during the course of your present lifetime were not possible to be obtained by anyone else within the living memory. But you just know that all these honors and prestige were false in as much as they were created by the illusory energy of Godhead called the Maya. By this falsity, I do not mean to say that your so many friends were false to you, nor you were false to them. By this falsity, I mean illusion, or in other words, the false friendship and honors obtained thereby were but creation of Maya, and therefore they are always temporary or false, as you may call it. But none of you, neither your friends nor yourself, know this truth. A sadhu is not supposed to flatter, but to cut. This is the basis of friendship, that he cuts away the illusion of the materialistic person. Mahatma Gandhi, forsaken by his friends, bitterly disappointed at the outcome of the long, hard struggle for Indian independence, and apprehensive about the future, had been reduced to a position in which he might be able to realize that his friends and work were ultimately illusory. Thus, it was the perfect time for him to comprehend Abhay's message. Now, by the grace of God, that illusion is going to be clear, and thus your faithful friends like Acharya Kripalini and others are accusing you for inability to the at the present moment to give them any practical program of work as you happen to give them during the glorious days of non-cooperation movement. So you are also in a plight to find out a proper solution for the present political tangle created by your opponents. You should therefore take a note of warning from your insignificant friend like me that unless you retire timely from politics and engage yourself 100% in the preaching work of Bhagavad Gita, which is the real function of the Mahatmas, you shall have to meet with such inglorious deaths like deaths as Mussolini, Hitler, or Lloyd George met with. For years, Abe had wanted to approach Mahatma Gandhi with this message. In fact, he had written a book for, although it had been of no avail. But now he was convinced that unless Gandhi got out of politics, he would soon die in inglorious death. That Gandhi was remaining active in politics rather than preaching devotional service put him in need of a warning. Abe was writing to save friend. You can easily understand as to how some of your political enemies in the garb of friends, both Indian and English, have deliberately cheated you and have broken your heart by doing same mischief for which you have struggled so hard for so many years. You are the chiefly Hindu-Muslim unity in India, and they have tactfully managed to undo your work by creation of the Pakistan and India separately. You wanted freedom for India, but they have given permanent dependence on India. You want to do something for the upliftment of the position of the Vangis, but they are still rottling as Vangis, even though you are living in the Vangi colony. They are all therefore illusions, and when these things will be presented to you as they are, you must consider them as God sent. God has favored you by dissipating the illusion, and you are hovering in, and by the same illusion, you are nursing those ideas as truth. Our dutifully attempted to inform Gandhi that there was nothing absolute within this relative world. Ahimsa or non-violence must always be followed by violence, just as light is followed by darkness. So this is also a very nice quote I can say. I will just mention it in our note section. Nothing is absolute in the dual world. You didn't know this, wrote away. Neither you ever cared to know this from the right sources, and rather for all your attempts to create unity were followed by disunity and ahimsa was followed by himsa. Abhay pointed out that Gandhi had never undergone the standard practice for spiritual advancement, namely accepting a bona fide spiritual master. Although Bhagavad Gita declares the necessity of accepting Guru in a disciplic succession, Gandhi was well known for listening to his inner voice and for extracting ideas from various writers like Ruskin and Thoreau and mixing them with teachings from the New Testament and the Gita. Had Gandhi approached a guru, said Abhay, he would not have become bewildered within the sphere of relative truth. In the Katha it is ordered that one must approach the bona fide guru, who is not only well versed in all scriptures of the world, but is also to realize soul in Brahman, the absolute, in order to learn the science of absolute truth. So also it is instructed in the Bhagavad Gita as follows: Tad vidhi pranipatena pariprasnena sevaya upadekshyanti te jnanam jnaninam tattvadarshina. Bhagavad Gita 4.34. But I know that you never underwent such transcendental teaching except some severe penances which you invented for your purpose, as you have invented so many things in the course of experimenting with the relative truths. You might have easily avoided them if you had approached the Guru as above mentioned. Recognizing Mahatma Gandhi's godly qualities and austerities, our request to him to employ his moral elevation for surrendering to the absolute truth, our asked him to get out of politics immediately. But your sincere efforts to attain some godly qualities by austerities, etc., surely have raised you to some higher platform which you can better utilize for the purpose of the absolute truth. If you, however, remain satisfied with such temporary position only and do not try to know the absolute truth, then surely you are to fall down from the artificially exalted position under the laws of nature. But if you want really to approach the absolute truth and want to do some real good to the people in general all over the world, which shall include your ideas of unity, peace, and non-violence, then you must give up the rotten politics immediately and rise up for the preaching work of the philosophy and religion of Bhagavad Gita without offering unnecessary and dogmatic interpretation on them. I had occasionally discussed this subject in my paper, Back to Godhead, and a leaf from the same is enclosed here for your reference. I only request you to retire from politics, at least for a month only, and let us have a discussion on the Bhagavad Gita. I am sure thereby that you shall get new light from the result of such discussions, not only for your benefit, but for the benefit of the world at large, as I know that you are sincere, honest, and a moralist. Awaiting your reply with interest. Yours sincerely, Ave Charande. So, this is all about the letter which Srila Prabhupada has written to Mahatma Gandhi. So, I'll just make a note of it in our note section. So, it is all about the letter. So, you can see there's a lot of philosophy behind it, how Prabhupada has suggested a lot of given advice to him to follow. Let's see how it happens in the next plot actually. Letter to Mahatma Gandhi from Srila Prabhupada. There was no reply. A month later, Gandhi announced that he will fast until death unless India made a payment of 550 million rupees to Pakistan, a previous condition of the partition agreement. At first, Hindu refugees from Pakistan demonstrated outside Gandhi's doctrine room chanting, "Let Gandhi die." But as he fasted each day closer to death, he aroused heartfelt concern of the nation, and the government leaders repaid the money to Pakistan. Then the great crowds approached him chanting, "Let Gandhi live." Meanwhile, Hindu Muslim violence continued. On January 30, the day after he had drafted a new constitution for the Congress party, Gandhi took his evening meal, walked at his spinning wheel, then walked towards his evening prayer meeting and was shot 3 times in the chest. He died, crying out, "Name the Lord, Hey Ram." Hours later, of the previous month, suddenly read like a prophecy, but he had not been read by the person for whom it had been intended. Where the directors of the Mahatma Gandhi Memorial Nation Fund invited suggestions on how to commemorate Gandhi's life and work, Abhay wrote to them and simultaneously to Vallabhbhai Patel, India's deputy prime minister, proposing the Gandhian way to use the funds. Gandhi's whole life was dedicated to the service of humanity at large, with special interest for raising the moral standard. His latter activities showed that he was equal to everyone, and all the people of the world knew him more as a spiritual leader than a mere politician. Devotion to the Godhead was his ultimate aim, and when I say that his sacred memory should be perpetrated not in the ordinary way, but in the Gandhian way, I mean that fitting respects to his memory will be done in the following manner. Abhay wrote of Mahatma Gandhi rarely described Gandhi as a Vaishnava. Despite his pressing political activities, Gandhi had never missed the daily prayer meetings in the evenings. Even at the time of his assassination, he had been on his way to attend his daily kirtana. Abhay stressed that it was because of Gandhi's regular participation in the congregational prayer that he had been strong in his work to raise the moral standard of humanity. Gandhiji minus his spiritual activities, Abhay wrote, is an ordinary politician, but actually he was a saint among the statesmen. Abhay wrote that it had been Lord Chaitanya who had originated the congregational chanting of the names of Krishna and Rama, and his followers, the six Goswamis, had left a wealth of literature for discussion and understanding. The Memorial Fund Board should to take this lesson from Mahatmaji's practical life and develop it on a large scale. Therefore, one fitting memorial to Mahatma Gandhi would be to institute daily congregational readings from the Bhagavad Gita. When people's spiritual instincts were kindled by daily prayer meetings, then they would develop the highest qualities in their character. So this is also very meaningful and consider it in the inside our quote section. Abhay had a second suggestion. Gandhi was known for his attempts to enable the lower castes to enter the temples, and in Noakhali he had installed the deity Radha and Krishna for the ordinary man to worship. Although this was generally taken as a side issue of Gandhi's work, Abhay took it as an essence that Gandhi's was a theistic movement. Abe explained that although there were hundreds of thousands of temples in India, they were not being properly managed, and therefore educated citizens were neglecting them. In the original Basi culture, the purpose of temples had been to nurture spiritual culture. If the temples of India could be reorganized as vital spiritual centers, then the disturbed minds of the day would be trained for the life's higher duties, such education and practice. Abhay wrote, can help man in realizing the existence of God, without whose sanction, according to Mahatma Gandhi, not a blade of grass moves. He also referred to Gandhi's Harijan movement, which most people saw Gandhi's humanitarian effort to grant equal rights to untouchables, whom Gandhi had recognized as Harijan, people of God. Abe stressed that this was also an essentially spiritual aspect of Gandhi's life, but rather than simply rubber stamping an untouchable as horizon. Abe argued there must be a systematic program for elevating people of the lower classes. This program was taught in the Bhagavad Gita and could be best be applied under the guidance of a bona fide devotee of the Lord. Abe volunteered to take off the work on behalf of the memorial board. If the board, in attempting to commemorate Gandhi's efforts and accomplishments, neglected the essential spiritual aspects of Gandhi's life, Abe warned his memory will soon be dead, as he has been a lot of other politicians. Perhaps they saw Abhay as another opportunity seeking money as or a sectarian religionist, but Abhay saw himself as a lowly servant of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, seeing certain Vaishnava qualities in the character of Mahatma Gandhi. Abhay took the opportunity to introduce his spiritual master's message to the world, and by doing, he paid tribute to the Mahatma Gandhi, praising him as a great devotee interested in kirtana, temple worship, and elevating unfortunates to become people of God. While in on business in Madurai, South India, Abe sold some of his writings to Muthu Swami Shetty. So another person here we'll see, and another medical salesman, Mr. Chetti, was impressed and felt he could persuade his wealthy friend Dr. Allagappa, the famous Birla of the South, to finance the printing. In April of 1948, Mr. Chetty wrote to Abhay saying that he had been prompted to help Abhay for something God has meant. He asked Avacharyan to send him the complete Gitopanishad manuscript so that he could present it to Dr. Allagappa in Madras. Mr. Chetti had already written Dr. Allagappa about the first class work Gitopanishad to cover 1200 pages of royal size and had urged him to publish it for the benefit of religious minded people. It also mentioned that Ava had been trying to publish the book since 1946. Dr. Allagappa soon replied to Mr. Chetty here that he was interested. Mr. Chetty also wrote to Abhay, so I'm on my way to help you, and only God must help me. As for talking business with Dr. Allagappa, there would be no need, since once he does it for the sake of benevolence, anticipating success. Mr. Chetty invited Abhay to come to Madras to meet Dr. Allagappa. There he will arrange for the what God has meant for you to do in religious duty. In Madras, Abhay would be able to check and correct the proofs of the manuscript and see the book through the various stages of printing. It was a big opportunity, and Abhay was not one to miss an opportunity. If the book could be published, it would be a great victory in his mission to fulfill the request of Śrīla Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. So here we have seen the two characters coming up here, Dr. Allagappa and Mr. Chetty. And Dr. Allagappa is actually interested in publishing Upanishad. So let's make a note of it. Dr. Allagappa, Mr. Chetty, and Gita Upanishad. Then the worst thing happened. The manuscript was stolen. So it was the only copy, and the one Abhay was keeping safely at home. He questioned his family and servants. No one knew what had happened. Abhay was baffled. So much work had been undone. He felt he had worked so many months for nothing, although he couldn't prove anything. He suspected that his servant or even his son might have done it within a motive for raising money, but it remained a mystery. During 1949, Abhay wrote articles in Bengali and submitted to his godbrother B.P. Kesava Maharaj, who published them in the Gaudiya Patrika. Abhay's format for addressing world problems was the same as his spiritual masters. Even at the first meeting in 1922, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati had countered Abhay's nationalistic arguments by stressing that the real crisis in the world has neither social nor political and nothing material, but was not simply the dearth of transcendental knowledge. Abhay simply elaborated on this theme. He never advocated that the ordinary concerns of the world be disregarded, but he stressed that crisis can be solved only when the leadership is God conscious. If Krishna consciousness were the footpath, other concerns could be brought into line, but without Krishna consciousness, so-called solutions were only folly. Abhay began his first Bengali article by quoting an editorial from the Allahabad edition of the Calcutta newspaper, Amrita Bachar. The editor had sorely lamented that India's worst troubles had not yet ended despite national independence. The National Week has begun. The memories of Jallianwala Bagh and political saffron no longer trouble us, but our trouble is far from being at the end. In a dispensation of providence, mankind cannot have any rest. If one kind of trouble goes, another quickly follows. India, politically free, is faced with difficulties no less serious than those that troubled us under a foreign rule. Aware seized on this editorial reflection as proof of the basic defect of all worldly plans for amelioration. He pointed out that although India had been subjugated by foreign rulers since the time of Muhammad Ghori 1050 AD, India prior to that had never been subjugated. In those days, India had been a God conscious nation. It was when India's leaders had abandoned their spiritual heritage that India had fallen. Thus, Indians should see that they were now being punished by stringent laws of material nature. The Honorable Editor Amrita Patrika, however, noted, has written so sadly, if one trouble goes, another quickly follows. But that was stated in the Bhagavad Gita a long time previously. It was same theme he had stated in his 1944 Back to Godhead articles, and the theme of so many of his letters also. Man, due to his neglect of Supreme Lord, is being punished by material nature, and which is directly controlled by the Supreme Lord. Men may write newspaper articles, pass measures at meetings and conferences, and attempt to overcome nature by scientific research. Yet they will remain unable to surmount nature's law. As they try to escape their punishments, the Supreme Lord will cast them deeper into the illusion, and then they will fall miserably. Abhay quoted an appropriate Bengali saying, I was trying to make a statue of Siva, but I ended up making a monkey. So this is also a quote which we will make in our note. So we'll stop here and we will continue in the next session from this paragraph in order to read the world of misery, and we'll complete this chapter. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada ki jai.